The following content is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition.
You're listening to the Everyday Therapy Podcast. I'm JC Rader.
And I'm Julianne Schroeder.
And we're therapists bringing you honest conversations around emotional wellness and self-development.
Inspired by our personal experiences in therapy and because of our clients, we realize therapy has so much to offer both on and off the couch. Listen for tips and tools to navigate all the challenges that life throws your way.
To give us feedback on topics and guests, or for more information on our community events, counseling, or online services, contact us at everydaytherapypodcast.com. Hello, let's jump right in and talk about our sponsors first.
Yes, gotta show some love.
Yes, yeah. So Lifeologie is a group private practice here in the heart of Dallas, and they are spreading all over the DFW Metroplex and Austin, Texas, Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Where I was born.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, very cool. But they're a group private practice that offers so many different counselors with different specialties, a variety of price ranges, I think starting at $35.
Which is a bargain.
Yeah, yeah. And what else, Julianne? What do we love about them?
Well, that they're really about collaborating with each other to provide, feedback amongst therapists so that they can really provide the best services.
Yeah, they're client-centered, so they're there for you. Yeah. And all of the clients that I'm not able to see, I used to work there, so I do really trust them and love them. I refer all the clients that I can't see there, so if that says anything. So there's no reason that if you haven't seen a counselor and you want to, you should be able to by reaching out to them at wefixbrains.com. Creative solutions to stuck problems.
Yes, and they so much believe in creativity and different ways of helping people to grow and heal that they have started a Lifeologie Institute for Psychotherapeutic Yoga.
Mouthful.
Yes, and we are both proud graduates, and I'm also on staff there now recently as well for therapeutic yoga. So yoga for your brain, yoga for mental health. So no need to do any crazy poses, get super flexible, but they really believe in bringing the power of Eastern and the Western to really provide healing and change.
Yeah. So if you've wanted just coping skills in general, to understand more about yoga personally, if you want to be a yoga teacher, or if you're a therapist looking for more tools, then it is an amazing program. It's unlike any other. Like, one of their pieces in their curriculum is the neurobiology of yoga. You're not going to get that anywhere else. So cool. Check them out. And let's talk about our topic for today. I'm so excited. I feel a little nervous. I feel like it's my best friend because I see her on Instagram all the time. And so we have Sara Jane Case here.
There she is.
With Enneagram and Coffee. So if you've heard of that, she went viral in a week with you have 200,000 followers over.
Yeah, in less than 2 months. It's been insane. It's been a whirlwind.
It's so crazy. Yeah, I follow both your personal Instagram and then the Enneagram and Coffee. And I found you first whenever I had the flu and you were doing your reset day. And I could not get out of bed, and you were cleaning out one of your closets, and you were meal prepping and doing laundry and yoga. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm such a bad adult. But it's so satisfying to watch you do your reset days and all the cool things you do on social media.
Yeah, well, I think the reset days, I just clarify, I do that once a month. So not every weekend.
Okay. Yes,
that makes me feel like a better adult. I'm not failing at life.
But it's such a good idea too. Like, I've started instilling it in the past month that I found you.
Yeah,
so it is
good.
really cool.
That makes me so happy.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's something to that, like restarting everything and just having, like, I get to start a fresh start, and at least for the next week or 2 weeks, everything's new, and that feels so nice.
Yes. So you are, I think, once a photographer, writer, coach. You have so much going on, which makes sense that you're a 7 on the Enneagram, right?
Yeah. It's funny. It took me several years to figure out what my number was, and now that I look back, it's just so funny because it's like it was so obvious because I doing so many things. But right now, primarily, I'm a coach and then a writer, and then I have Enneagram and Coffee, which is its own special business.
Yes. Yeah. It's so interesting in working with clients. And I think for me and Julian, trying to figure out our number, people think that you have to have it like immediately. But it can take a really long time to figure it out. So Enneagram, what is it? Can you give us a brief overview of it?
Yeah, so the Enneagram is an ancient personality tool, and we can compare it to something like the Myers-Briggs, but what's a little bit different about it is that it's for internal, so it's motivation based. So a lot of times we're looking at these personality tests and they're telling us, oh, you're extroverted, you're introverted. What the Enneagram does is it says, like, what's driving you, what's motivating you, what are you afraid of, and then how is that impacting your life? And so what I think the Enneagram really does is it shows us our defense mechanisms and the things that we use to kind of shield ourselves or protect ourselves, and then how we can get back to our truest essence of who we really are.
That's such a beautiful description.
It really is.
As therapists, you can see why we'd like the Enneagram tool, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You just use some lingo that makes, us curious. Have you gone through therapy before, or is the self-discovery been on your own?
Yeah, well, so I have done some therapy, but I've just kind of always been I've always been inquisitive. I've always been really self-reflective. I can remember I've had a journal since I was 9 years old, and I've written every single day I have every journal I've had since I was 9. And I can look back and it's almost embarrassingly funny how kind of self-helpy I was when I was like in middle school and high school, and I had like all these like little inspirational quotes written down and like, live your dreams, be the best, So I've always kind of been that way. And then at this point, I've gone through 3 different rounds of working with therapists. And I think it took me a long time to realize that you're supposed to try it out and not commit right away. And I think
definitely.
Can you share? Yeah. Can you share more with our listeners about that?
Yeah. So what I had this I've done this every time where I go into therapy and I say, okay, here's all the things I figured out about myself this week. And I didn't realize that there's like a process with that, right? So the first few sessions, they might just be letting me do that. And I thought, like, they're not pushing me enough. They're not like prodding me enough. But then now at this point in my life, I have enough friends who are therapists where they're like, no, like, you just need to like wait. Like, you keep showing up and they're going to pull that out of you.
It takes time and space.
Yeah. But I kept thinking, like, I'm just tricking them. Thinking I don't have any problems.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And it kind of does remind me of the 7, right? Like kind of wanting to get stuff done and not kind of feel that pain or discomfort.
Yeah, and I literally would go into a session and be like, okay, so I had an argument with my boyfriend this week. Here's what I learned from that. Here's how I've solved it. And then just wait for them to tell me what's next. And
good job, or no.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you just need to get in there a little bit more.
Yes,
it doesn't have to feel like a performance.
Yeah, totally. And I think that a 7, I think we have this tendency to be very, like, everything's good, everything's fine. I've already fixed all of the stuff. I've processed it. We're moving on, and forget to. So it can be so convincing that people don't even know. You have to be willing to say, and I think the Enneagram gives me that language, because all of those attempts were pre-Enneagram. So now I know, my tendency is to just present this as being complete, or like I don't need to work through these things because I'm happy. And instead being able to say, oh, like what's the ick going on that is impacting me even if I'm not really digesting it right now.
What I love about the Enneagram is it helps build self-awareness and insight like nothing else. Like it is just so helpful in that regard. And like you said, giving it a language, being able to label it and kind of normalize. Like, okay, other people are dealing with this too. But for our listeners that a lot of them do know about the Enneagram and they're really excited to hear you talk about it. But for our listeners that haven't explored it or looked into it at all, where should they get started in looking at what is their number?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So I think a lot of times with personality tools, we want to take a test and we want the test to tell us what we are. And you can take a test on the Enneagram, but honestly, what I would do is go to a really good website like Enneagram Institute or Integrative9, the number 9.com are both really great resources just to read about the types. So even if you take the test on either of those websites, still go in and read about the top 2, 3 that kind of pique your interest, because the Enneagram is about self-understanding and self-awareness. So you know what you are. You have to read the one and define yourself.
Yeah. What was it like for you in that? You said it took you 2 years. So what was that process like in figuring it out?
Yeah. So I knew so much about all the types before I really was able to identify myself. And I think I still can play the game of I see myself in every type. I think, we all are every type in some way or another.
Yes.
It's just what are we led by, like what's our motivating factor. So it took me a long time, and I think it's because when I first found out about the Enneagram, I was really going through a hard time. I was under a lot of stress, and so I was showing up. I wasn't like happy all the time. And I think when we read about 7s, we get a lot of like the good. Everyone's like, oh, 7s are like the life of the party. They're so fun. Always happy, happy, happy. And I am a lot more grounded and a lot more emotionally aware than that. And so it was confusing for me because I would read about 7s and I would think like, oh, they're just like always up, always wanting to play. And I had seasons of my life like that for sure, but I've just mellowed out a lot and have a lot more access at this point. And so I kept thinking like, I'm not that fun, but it is more about the variety and the freedom being the motivating factor, the fear of having to sit in emotional pain and reasoning my pain through my intellect instead of feeling it in my heart or in my gut, right? And trying to like, okay, well, what's my pain point? How can I solve that? And that was really how I ended up recognizing what I was.
Well, thank goodness you didn't find it out right away, because otherwise you wouldn't have learned about all the different types and created Enneagram and Coffee, which I feel like you kind of like normalized it and made it the Enneagram fun.
That makes me so happy to hear, because I think I was talking to someone recently and I was like, there has to be a gateway. There has to be an entry point. And especially with something like the Enneagram, it's so overwhelming. It's like all these weird numbers and layers. It's like trying to learn Photoshop for your soul or something.
All of this. That's such a good description. That's so true.
And so overwhelming.
Yeah. Photoshop for your soul.
And you like learn, it's like as soon as you learn like a little bit, it's like, well, actually, surprise, there's like 3 more layers here.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's so, there's a lot. It's really in depth. What was your favorite, this was Julianne's question, but what was your favorite Enneagram and Coffee post to make?
Ooh, I think either the first dates, like what people do on a first date, because I was laughing while I was making them. Or the conflict operation one. I think that was really fun.
Yes. Yeah. Julianne, tell her what yours was, your favorite one. You sent it to me today.
Oh, today, yes, which I think is really in alignment with what, us wanting to talk about at some point here too, was the superpowers.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that makes me so happy you like that one. I think it's fun to think about. I tried to do specific superheroes. And then I was like, I think superpowers just works better. But I like to ask that question of people, like in general, like what is your superpower as your number? I think is a really fun thing to think about, because I think the Enneagram makes you deal with your darkness a lot.
Yes, yeah, it can be really negative, like your shadow side.
Yeah.
So, but there's so many gifts to all the different numbers. Will you give us a brief kind of description of each type?
Yeah. I'll try and run through them. So type 1 is the reformer. So they are motivated by being good, being above reproach. And then there's type 2, which is the helper, and they're motivated by the desire to be loved and be worthy of love. And so then they offer a lot of help to other people as their way of kind of pulling that love in. And then there's type 3, which is the achiever, and they're driven by rising to the top of any of the group that they're surrounded by or their culture. Then there's type 4, which is the individualist, and they're driven by being unique, being different. They're also very much driven by the desire to be understood for who they are. Then we have type 5, who is the investigator, and they're driven by the desire to take in knowledge so that they can be capable for anything that comes their way. And then there's type 6, which is the loyalist, and they're driven by the desire for safety and security. And then there is type 7, which is the enthusiast, which they are driven by the desire to be free of emotional pain or to not be trapped in emotional pain. And then there is type 8, which is the challenger, and they're driven by the desire to not be controlled or to not have physical harm done on them. And then there's type 9, which is the peacemaker, and they're driven by peace of mind and the desire to avoid conflict.
Wow, it's like you've talked about this a time or two. You've got it down.
And I love hearing different people's description of them all, because you have different titles for them or descriptors, and I like that you lead with the motivations, the drives, because that's kind of what's important.
Yeah, and I think that was really confusing for me when I was deciding my type, was all of the descriptions that were about like things we do, and I think that can look so different. It's so varied. We're all unique human beings, but those motivations, those driving fears, I think that's where the good stuff is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those childhood wounds.
Yeah. Just tell me about your childhood wound.
Yes,
you know,
yeah.
casual.
No big deal at all. Yeah. So when we look at these wounds, though, we can laugh. I mean, we have to be able to have space to look and not see ourselves as only that aspect, the shadow part of us. But I know we wanted to talk about today just how, when looking at the numbers, so often, it can create a lot of shame because we're looking at like what we don't want to acknowledge, and then how we move into self-acceptance. And you love the Enneagram for that reason, that it can help with that. Can you share a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's magic that does happen on the other side of looking at our darkness. I think that when we're able to fully look at all of the things that we do and we bring to the table that we're uncomfortable with, it provides freedom, right? It provides, there's no one can surprise us. And then we know what's ours and what someone else's and what we're bringing to the table in any given moment. And then the other beautiful thing about looking at that is that typically, right, that darkness, that sticky stuff is the same exact thing as all of these pieces of us that are so incredible. And recognizing that if I didn't have one, I couldn't fully have the other is, I think, so life-giving, because we can start to recognize that all of these things that maybe I've held shame for in my life, they're one and the same as all of these things that I really wouldn't change. And if I were only all the good, I would be 1, very boring, 2, very unrelatable, and 3, probably not a very good person, because I wouldn't be able to empathize with anyone or hold compassion for anyone else because I have never had any bad moments. So yeah, I think that there's just something about pairing that dark, pairing it with the light, and holding it all as just, this is all me. And being able to look and say, okay, all 9 of us, all 9 types of us have good and bad. That's just a human condition.
Yeah.
Preach.
Yes. I love that you can't have light without the darkness. Like, you have to have a dichotomy. You have to have 2 different things. We just recorded an episode on feelings the other day and kind of the gift of feeling. And I feel like you touched on that with talking about if you don't have shame, then you don't have that humility piece.
Yeah.
You aren't a human.
Yeah, we're like this perfect robot situation that makes other people feel bad about, or we can't make anybody feel anything, but yeah. But I think there's so much magic to being comfortable with the fact that we're all just kind of a little messed up.
Yes. We're all human. We're all a little crazy. We're all a little messed up. But when we can shift from the shame of this is wrong, or I am wrong, into, okay, this is part of being human, and not being victim to this is just how I am, and taking appropriate responsibility. Okay, all right, I know this, and what can I do about it? So I wonder, could we go into each of the 9 types and share from your experience what people find hard, or what's maybe shaming about each type, and then how you would use self-acceptance and moving from that?
Yeah, I like that. So I think oftentimes before we hop into that, I want to say that I think sometimes we're doing this kind of hot potato thing with blame, and we're trying. Sorry,
it's okay. Technical difficulties happen.
Very popular. People are calling me. So I think what we tend to do is we try to do this kind of hot potato thing with blame, and we try to say, I am this is yours, it's not mine, it's not mine, it's not mine, and pass it back and forth. And I think what the Enneagram does is it allows us to say, okay, this is mine, and I know it is mine, and I know it is yours, and so I can hold space for this. And so what I'll run through the types and kind of talk about what you might, it's this is what you're going to have to be own, and then how that on the flip side is also can be a beautiful thing.
Yeah, super
cool. So type 1, the kind of hot potato thing is the desire to constantly reform things, kind of constantly perfect things. And so what that can look like internally is a really harsh inner critic, never thinking that you quite fulfill, do everything right. What ones tend to feel some shame around is the tendency to do that for other people. So kind of looking at a situation, seeing someone doing something and thinking that they should be doing a better job. And ones are and I think what the core of that is that ones are just want to be good people. And I think that we forget that that's what they're seeking, is really to just be good. And that kind of natural ding, 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 ding is because what's happening on the inside is so much more intense than what they're even expressing. That inner critic is so much worse than what they're expressing outward. And so on the flip side of that, right, that constant kind of awareness of what could be improved, the beautiful side of that is that ones are just good people. They just are good humans. They're going to follow through with their word. They're going to look out for the good of the common, of everybody. And they just want things to be the best that they can be.
Yeah, I can see it would be super easy to be I'm so critical, I'm picky, I complain a lot, versus yeah, I come from a good place. I want the best. I saw Ziggy, our tech wizard over here, nodding his head. Ziggy, are you a 1?
I don't know if I'm a 1, but I do frequently find myself wishing that my employees would do a better job.
Yes. Well, you should look at the test online while we're talking. See if
I am taking it right now. So.
Perfect.
Oh my God, I love that. Also, Ziggy, I feel like it would make him really good at his job.
Yeah.
just being able to say, okay, this isn't quite right. Like as a 7, I'm going to move on before it gets correct. I'm just going to be like, well, enough is okay.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which like, that would make me very bad at his job.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So type 2s, I think a lot of the shame that can happen for type 2 is twofold. One, I think that when 2s read their type, I think they often feel too emotional, and they often feel like, I know it's you.
We're both 2s.
I was just having a conversation with mentor Wednesday, and just really kind of stuck in a shame piece of like, I feel too much. I'm too sensitive. I can't do this. And she literally used the word superpower. Like, this is a gift that you have to use with others.
Yeah.
So it's just ironic.
I love that so much. I think that that's exactly it. And then I think the other side, and you guys tell me, but I think 2s tend to feel like they need too much, even though they don't want to say they need anything, right? But like, it's like no one can love you like you love them. And so it's like a constant, like, I'm trying to receive from you, but like you're not giving, and I can't quite ask in the way that feels right because you can't read my mind like I can read your mind.
Absolutely. Yes. I think definitely identify as like caretaker, nurturer, like above and beyond. And like, and I've done my own work, but originally, just kind of feeling disappointed. Like, why aren't they trying as hard as me? And why aren't they doing as much as I'm doing?
Yeah. Under stress, you can definitely take on the martyr role.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that like in the flip side of that, of course, is that you guys are love in human form. Like you can make someone feel so worthy.
We're love in human form.
But like you guys can make someone feel so worthy of being alive. I'm just like, you know what, your presence here matters. I see what you're capable of. I see who you are. I see all of this beautiful stuff in you. And I want to make sure that you are like valued and encouraged and supported. And doing so with like such subtlety, even like the awareness, you walk into a room and you're like, I see you, I value you, versus what a lot of times I need you to say to me, will you tell me that I'm valued before I'm going to think to do it,
Yeah.
And we need that as a culture. We need people who are passionately loving other people.
I'll write you a check later. Thank you for that affirmation.
Yes. Yeah.
I wish that was my job. I could just be like, you come here and then I'll just pump you up.
Yes. Be your cheerleader.
Yeah. So I think, so then we move into 3s, and I think the 3s are, I think the shame side of a 3, what can kind of feel like, I don't know if I want to identify with this, is the tendency to put on masks. So 3s will walk into a room and they will become whatever they need to be in that room in order to be seen as successful, in order to make other people comfortable with them as well. And so I think that can feel exposing if you haven't done a lot of work on that, right? Especially because 3s can kind of get caught up in a certain path to success, and they forget to ask themselves, what do I want? What do I need? And so they might go, 15 years, 30 years, and just kind of growing and succeeding and forgetting to ever ask if that's what they wanted or not. And
easy to force something. I always think of that square, like trying to force a square peg into a round hole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think that can be so hard because you can feel exposed in that moment. You can feel like you're there because you're like being forced to look at, is this the life I want for myself, maybe for the first time ever? And so on the flip side of that, as a 3, what they're really amazing at is making other people feel really comfortable. They're able to quickly push other people into their own power. And a really healthy 3 is going to make sure that everyone in their life is living the life that they desire for themselves, even if a 3 doesn't know how to look in and do it on their own. They're going to be able to say, hey, you go do this. Don't make excuses. You can do the things you want to do. Here's the next step. Here's who you need to connect to. Let me support you. Let me help you. Because threes are very good at connecting and networking. And really that whole concept of, what is it? The sinking, the rising ship, a rising tide.
Girl, sorry.
I don't know.
She could help you out. We'll throw you a lifesaver, but I don't have one.
I think it's a rising tide lifts all ships.
Yes.
There we
yes.
go. Thank you, Ziggy.
Thank you, Ziggy. We need you. So that piece, that's a 3, right? That's a really healthy 3 doing
That's
that.
our
It's like
cheerleader.
we're all. Yeah. And like, here are the tactical steps. Like, this is what you need to know to get this stuff done. And then you guys want me to do 4?
Yes.
Okay. So 4, I think when I think about a 4 and I think about shame, it breaks my heart because I think that they probably struggle with shame the most.
I can so see that.
Yeah. And so, so for our 4s, the shame comes in of just feeling like they don't have an identity, feeling like they need something outside of themselves to create an identity. And so what that can feel like is that they have this like hole they're trying to like fill up with some, or like cover up even with some sort of identity, or like, okay, I'm a baker now, so like I'm going to do all the baker stuff. And that will make them feel like they have a purpose, or they have something that sets them apart. And on the flip side of that, 4s tend to be extremely creative. They are extremely empathetic. They try out tons of new things, and they experience this like range of emotions that most of us don't even have like a glimmer into. Like, they're able to really go to the depths, and they're really able to experience some like really beautiful highs and like happiness and joy. And they can often feel like they're too much and like, oh, they overwhelm other people. But on the flip side of that is like they have so much access to life and like all that life has to offer us on the internal world. And that's pretty incredible.
I like that idea. They can tap in and they feel everything, which sometimes it's hard because you're feeling the not so, like, the difficult emotions too.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of 4s, we think like, oh, there's like, we use the word melancholy with 4s a lot, but I think it's less like, oh, they're just like sad all the time, and more that they kind of like it. They kind of like that sad feeling. So you think about, I know we all have these moments, right, where we're maybe feeling a little bit sad, and we put on like a sad song and we like pretend like we're in a movie, you know? I think 4s just kind of live life like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
When I just think about an artist in any form of art, like you get that energy from deep emotion.
Yeah. And 4s are really amazing at experiencing life, digesting it, and then sharing what they've learned, and like sharing their own experience so that other people can then grow and change and shift and learn.
Yeah. That allows for such connection.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it allows us all to kind of see the range, like see what's possible in life and see the beauty and the little tiny things that exist in the world. I think we tend to forget about the beauty. That's the other thing with the identity with 4s. I could do this for my husband's a 4, so I'll have to cut myself off in a minute. But
I might be partial to a 4.
You love the 4s.
Yeah, I love a 4. But they're really aesthetically gifted. Usually, it's a very so that kind of like identity.
That usually,
yeah. I mean, I want to be like, I don't want to put but 4s tend to be really good at seeing beautiful things. I think I heard Cron one time say, like, think about the most beautiful hotel you've ever been in, and think about the lobby, and be like, an 8 didn't make that. Like, that was a 4, you know? And I was like, oh, yeah, that's good. I like that.
I love that. Yeah. This is making me, like, want to have a group of friends and have each different type so I can experience all these different things from every number. Let's get on that.
So I'm cut out. Since you're the 2, I'm not needed.
We can have 2 of us.
Oh, no. Yeah, 2 of each type.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're also on 5s. So I think the shame that fives tend to feel when they find out their number is this detachment piece, because a lot of times fives don't have the same, they kind of keep people out here. And I think we as a society tend to say like, are confused by detachment, right? We don't have language around it. We don't encourage it, you know? And so I think that is like, yes, a coping mechanism, but it's also a really great tool that they have and an ability to not throw themselves into everything that everyone else is experiencing. I interviewed a five recently who was talking about how, you know, when their kid is sad or their kid is really upset and they're learning a lesson and they're having a hard time with it, it's like, I'm really grateful for that ability in that moment because I'm able to remain calm. And he didn't say this, but I thought this, which was like, you're steady in that moment. You're secure. I know that I can kind of like if I'm a 3-year-old, I can like writhe and like lose it. And if you remain calm, then like I have a safe haven there. Fives are really good listeners. They're really good problem solvers. And they're also like I've heard several times like relationship experts be like, fives are a good marriage partner, because especially a healthy five, they can like listen, they'll remain objective. They're not going to take on your problems like you would take on their problems potentially, depending on your type, but they can really digest it. But they are also going to have to ask for what they need, which is typically a lot of alone time, a lot of space, and a lot of time with their thoughts.
I love that description of their gift. Yeah, it reminds me of a steady rock.
Yeah.
Detachment. Yeah, space and distance.
So our sixes are, they're kind of the shame that I think a lot of sixes have is their relationship to fear. And sometimes as a six, fear is going to be so prevalent. You're going to know, okay, anxiety is a forefront of my mind all the time. Other sixes, they don't realize necessarily that it's everything that they're doing, everything they're thinking is in direct relationship to the fears that they have. But that's kind of the underlying current. And so a lot of times they feel this feeling of, I'm anxious, and that can feel shameful. Like I'm always worried, or I'm worst case scenario. I'm always thinking about like everything that could go wrong. And that can on paper read as like being a bummer, right?
A wet blanket.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing about sixes on the flip side of that is that they're like making sure that we don't all just peril, right? Like having a six is like one of the top priorities for me as a hire when I think about being a seven, because it's like, I make decisions very fast. I hop right in and I'm like, yes, I'll do it. And then I forget to think about, well, what does that mean for me? Long term. And so having a six on your team is so helpful because they're able to say, hey, like, let's think this through a little bit. Let's consider what this could mean down the road. And let's set you up for this in a successful way. Because the other side of a six too is that they're so loyal and so supportive that like once you're like in their circle and they love you, they're going to go to bat for you. Like they are on your team. And so that worst case scenario is all for your benefit. It's never against you.
Yeah. You need a whoa before you go.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I love that.
I think of like a stereotypical job for a six would be risk management. Just somebody to look at all the risks that could possibly happen and keep them at bay.
1,000%. One of my favorite sixes is a home inspector. And I think that's a really, I want a six as my home inspector.
Yes. You want to have them take the Enneagram test before you hire them.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I do not want a 7 home inspector. Like don't come at me with that.
Your budget is going to be outrageous. You have a 7.
That's true. Oh yeah, so 7s, and I can tell you. So my shame. I think that there's 2 words one word that really stuck out to me when I read it that I was like, I don't like it. And then there's the moment that I knew I was a 7. And I'm going to tell you, and it's so embarrassing for me. Number 1 is the word was shallow. And I think every 7 that I know who reads that word is like, I am not, like, it's like, I won't own that. But I think the truth is that we don't know like how much we want to pull things up to the surface because we're willing to talk about things, but it's like emotionally detached from it. But if you come to me with still bleeding, still experiencing the pain, and want comfort, you're going to the wrong you shouldn't go to a 7 for that, right? And so 7s are going to want to like kind of pull you out of that and be like, whereas like a 4 is going to sit with you in it and they're going to let you be what you are in that moment. So that's kind of the shame there for a 7. And then the other one, the moment I realized I was a 7.
This one's hard for you to talk about.
Yeah, it's like the nail in the coffin for me. And this is the shame, is the ability and desire to just bail on things when they no longer work for you in whatever form or fashion. So I heard someone telling a story about they were like working with somebody and then the guy just kind of like dropped off the face of the planet and like never returned. And I was like, was he a 7? Was he a 7?
Like, I know what happened there.
Yeah. Like, oh God. And it like hurt because I can like think about like my younger years of like so many times where I was like overwhelmed or like just couldn't do it anymore. And I just didn't communicate and just bailed. Luckily, as I grew older, I learned to communicate in those moments and to ask for what I need earlier and to not promise things that I can't deliver. But gosh, like as like a college kid, I was just like, I'll take 18 hours of classes and do a full-time job and take on extracurricular activities.
It's a great idea.
Great. Yeah. And then you don't realize like, oh, you can't follow through with all those commitments and that negatively impacts other people. So with all of that, that's the shame, I think, for a lot of 7s is that inability to sit with sadness and other people's sadness. A lot of 7s feel like bad friends because they don't think about, like, I can speak for myself, but like, I don't think about what someone might need if they're not right in front of me. So I think a lot of 2s are good at just texting you when they think about you. Yeah. 7s are not good at that. We're not good at that. Yeah. And so that's kind of our secret shame. But then on the flip side of that, what we're able to do is see, like when someone is in need, we're able to help them find creative solutions to those problems, help them to really see the possibility in the things that they're looking to do. When we're also really good at reframing bad situations. So like if you're going through the worst time of your life and you need someone to let you cry, go to a 4. But if you're going through the worst time of your life and you need someone to say,
out of it.
Listen, it's going to be great. You're going to be fine. Let's talk about how we're going to move out of this. Let's talk about how every other bad time in your life has led you to something really good. You go to a 7. And then we're also just really highly productive, active people. I can just do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, your reset days.
You get your shit done.
Absolutely.
I know. I had to tell someone with reset days, I was like, you have to understand that this is my autopilot. Like, this isn't necessarily like the best thing. Like, the healthiest thing for me is to be in bed, like, still with my thoughts. Like, that's, like, insane to me. But that, like, reset day, it's like, oh, that's my norm.
Yeah. Yeah, you need a reset day too, which is just not getting out of bed the whole time.
Yes, yeah. Like one day a month where I'm just like, what's in here? What's going on inside of your soul today?
Right.
Sarah, as you're talking, I just love how you're interweaving, and in my mind, just I'm seeing the purpose in everything. Right. And what you were saying earlier, that we're all needed. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, as therapists, we understand, needing to address the pain, sit with it, not immediately react or numb or fix. And we need you, right, where you can, provide hope and solutions and move towards the future. So, I don't know. Yeah, I was just thinking, like, how cool that, we really all benefit from each other and our gifts.
Yeah. And I think that's For a while I think the reset day is like a particularly good example of like, oh, should I share this? Like, because if it's not everyone's autopilot, but I think, if I can inspire someone to do like one extra thing that serves them well, then I've done my job. But for a long time, I thought like, should I show up as that version? And I think that's where with the Enneagram, we can often feel like we should be different. But I think that more so what we need to just understand what is ours and how to handle it responsibly. So if I were to do a reset day and say, how dare you not do a reset day every month? It is completely different than doing a reset day and saying like, maybe you can add one thing in, maybe you need to sit in bed today, and that's okay too. Like, it's just like handle it responsibly.
Yes. Be your authentic self.
Handle responsibility.
Ultimately.
Well, let's create a label.
Yes, I know. Well, tell us about the 8 and the 9.
Yeah. So 8s, I think like 8s, I wouldn't say that they experience shame as much because they tend to not care what we think about them very much. But I think there's a lot of 8s, particularly female 8s, are taught not to be 8s. And we kind of treat 8s like they're all bad. Like in a lot of language, I think we talk about 7s like they're all good and 8s like they're all bad.
Yes.
And we're all just both. And I don't know why that language has kind of happened, but with our 8s, I think that the shame there is that people tend to, they are conflict forward. They're very direct, very honest. They're not shielding you.
Such a polite way to say it. Conflict forward.
They're not, they are kind of aggressively defending themselves and defending the people that they love and the things that they value, and forget to think about feelings in those conversations. And so that can feel, for an 8 who's reading that, it can feel like, no, I don't do that. Or like, I don't always do that, but what's on the flip side of that, what's on the flip side of an 8's kind of challenging nature is this like fierce defending of people who can't defend themselves. A lot of the 8s that I've talked to in interviews, and we've talked about how they almost like feel physically impenetrable. So they will put themselves sometimes like literally physically in between an aggressor and people who can't defend themselves, or emotionally. They feel like it's their job to take the hits and to protect the people that they don't believe can handle it, or they don't know for sure can handle it, because they do know that they can. And I think that is just the most beautiful thought to me. Like the idea that like you feel so passionately that these people should be defended. Not necessarily like you just want everything your way. You're just like, out here to antagonize people. I think it's more like,
it's ultimately altruistic.
Yes. Yeah. And obviously we're all on the spectrum of like what our intentions are, but I think for most 8s, it's like they've found, who needs to be defended, and whether that's themselves or that's like a people group, or whether that's, their family or the people closest to them. And they feel like there are threats coming in and they need to be the one to protect. And so that can be really beautiful when it's done for the good of a group, for a common good. And then the other side of that is that 8s just know how to get things done. They know how to come into a situation and say, you're in the wrong position for your skill set. Let's put you over here and put you in the right position for your skill set. And then they just make things more effective. They make people more effective. And a really healthy 8 is the most incredible leader, because they can really see where you shine. And then they're not going to ask you to do the things you're bad at. They're going to put you in the position that really serves you.
There's something powerful about being able to see things and also be direct and tell people that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And speaking of being direct, sorry, Sarah, I'm going to practice being an 8 right now. We're going to run out of time for our 9, because we want to make sure to leave space for you to share your resources and all of that. So can we transition into a 9 real quick?
Oh yeah, totally. So 9s are kind of their shame is that they tend to be very easygoing, kind of go with the flow. They don't have like really strong opinions. They don't often know what they want or how they want it. A lot of times when a nine's reading the description, they're going to feel like, and probably a lot of shame around the fact that like they're like tend to be homebodies and like not want to do a lot of things, not want to get out of their comfort zone. And so on the flip side of that is that nines are so good at seeing all perspectives, seeing people, really understanding why someone might do the things that they do, why they might have motivations. They're really good mediators, really good at diffusing conflict and making things just work a lot more smoothly.
Yes, our dear friend Whitney is a 9, and we hate that we always cut the 9 short. But
Sorry,
no, yeah, there's so much to talk about here. And before we get into you sharing your resources and take it from there, we're going to pause for our sponsor, Therapy Space.
Yes. So we love Therapy Space, and we just totally align with them. So they are offices for mental health therapists in the Dallas and actually Tennessee, Nashville area. And they just provide beautiful spaces for therapists just starting off in private practice or not wanting the responsibility of having to pay all the utilities and rent and buy Kleenexes and all the little things that you have to do as a business owner. So they are amazing in providing that for new therapists. And flexible.
Yeah, flexible. And, there's such a need for this. They're expanding in Dallas. And if you mention our podcast, you get 1 month free, correct?
Yes. Yeah. 1 month free.
Which is super generous.
Yeah. Flexible leases. So you can schedule from 1 day to 7 days a week if you want to. So they are amazing. Thanks, Therapy Space.
Yes.
Yeah. We have some friends who have signed up with them recently and are really loving it.
And then let's see, can we get Sarah back?
There she is.
Yes. Yes.
Hi. Yes. Thanks, Sarah. Listen, we want to hear, what are some good resources for the Enneagram?
Yeah, so I really like the test at integrative9.com, and then enneagraminstitute.com, and then my favorite like starter book is The Road Back to You.
That is a good one.
Yeah, such a good place to like get your feet wet, and then you can kind of go from there to get into the deeper readings.
Yeah. And then how can people work with you?
Yeah, so I have 2 ways right now. Number one is I have an Enneagram Summit that is active right now. You can still join. And I have 39 workshops over 5 days. You can get the All Access Pass, which gives you lifetime access to tons of workshops about the Enneagram. And every interview has been absolutely incredible. And then I have a membership. Oh, God.
Oh, I was just going to say, I can't imagine. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's been absolutely incredible. Like people are giving tons of wisdom. I have people from each Enneagram type sharing about their type, and it's been really, really awesome. So you guys can check that out. If you go to Enneagram and Coffee, there's a link in the bio there. That's the easiest way. Okay. And then I have a membership community called the Brave Collective. So if organization, creativity, is something that you're looking for, more a deeper relationship to yourself, the Brave Collective is probably where you want to be. And sarajanecase.com is where you can find that.
Awesome. We'll make sure to list all that in our show notes. And we can't thank you enough for your generosity, and your wisdom. Are there any last words you want to share with our listeners?
I think, as you're going into this work, as you're looking at the Enneagram, I hope that you are able to really recognize that it's about getting closer to yourself and about understanding yourself. And I hope that you greet yourself with compassion. I think that's the number one thing you can do, is really say, speak to yourself tenderly, speak to yourself like a kid, and approach this work from the place of comforting and caregiving, and not from a place of discipline or control or trying to change. I think that's how you're going to get the most out of it.
I love that.
Oh my gosh.
So
you are incredible. Yeah. You're speaking our language.
Ziggy, did you figure out what your number was?
I believe that I am a 6.
Okay. It took Sara Jane 2 years, but Ziggy, maybe it just took him 50 minutes after listening to your 2 years of experience. Who knows? Yes. Thank you so much, Sara Jane. We hope to see you soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Everyday Therapy podcast. Don't forget to rate and review us on iTunes and share with your friends. It really helps us reach more people.
We might only record once a week, but we're with you every day.